Good morning, God damn it. Piss and Vinegar Day 159, leg day. Uh, I think this is the third week of not doing any deadlifts or barbell squats. I just want to let my back totally get back to square one, and then I'll introduce the squat next week and see if that gives me any issues. If it doesn't, then I'll keep doing squats and I'll know it was the deadlift. If I introduce a squat, it gives my back issues. I'll take a few weeks off doing either again. I'll introduce the deadlift again. And if that gives me issues, then it's both. Or if that doesn't give me issues, it's a squat, or vice versa. So next week, if I do the squat, no problem. I'll know it's the deadlift. If I otherwise I'll know it's the other way around. So yeah, apart from that, lever bar squat. The other problem is now with my leg day is this shit's gotten too easy. This is up to 170 kilos, and that's the max that this thing can take. I'm also very apprehensive throughout these sets because I'm just worried about this breaking on me. It would be very dangerous if this broke, and the bar is starting to bend more and more that I use heavier and heavier weights. So for safety reasons, I'm very apprehensive for this set. I can't get as intense as I would have liked. So then I tried a slightly different variation in order to make more out of less weights. So that was 170. This is only 110. And by sitting back and putting my toes elevated, it was a hell of a lot harder. But then I didn't feel as much in the quads, for one. And two, the resistance curve sucked. So it was nigh impossible to get back up at the bottom. I felt very unbalanced. And in order to override that fact, I then had to pull myself at the bottom to get out of the hole. That felt really difficult, but then at the top it felt too easy. So yeah, I could override the resistance curve by pulling myself, but then you can't standardize the lift, and that's really important. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. I think I'm just going to have to modify this, lever bar squat thing that I've got here and just make it, one, more stable and less likely to potentially break on me and making me less anxious throughout the sets, and two, make it so I can load it up with more weights because 170 kilos is getting too light for a bunch of shit, the squat and the calf raise. So yeah, anyway, leg day is going to be confusing. I mean, fuck, man, I wish I had a deadlift. I wish I had a leg press, a leg extension, all those machines to be able to take legs to failure with, because upper body, like, you can pretty easily take the upper body to failure with like compound movements without machines safely. Like, you just have to use dumbbells for like presses, for example. That way, if you fail, you can just chuck it to the side. Or the machines that you use for like back and stuff are very, you can use for a lot of things. Like the cable row machine I've got also allows me to do a hell of a lot of shit. But anyway, yeah. So hopefully one day I'll get a leg press and a leg extension machine. I'm looking into that at the moment. I don't really have the space, but I might potentially do it. Anyway, so a subscriber asked the other day, what do I think about macros and how do macros change when you do high intensity training? And to that, I say they don't. Your macros do not change whether you're doing volume or intensity. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter the training style. What matters is that you have numero uno, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you're 200 pounds, you eat 200 grams of protein in order to satiate your protein demands in order to build muscle. You're trying to replenish your skin, hair, organs, all the vital things, and then beyond that point, any protein left will go towards your muscle, you don't really need much. You only need 1 gram per pound of body, per gram of muscle in order to replenish it. So it's pretty well documented now that 1 gram per pound of body weight, it will suffice for optimal muscle gains. If you're on anabolics or something, then probably higher, I'd imagine, because you're increasing protein synthesis. But for us naturals, I mean, that's plenty enough. I think protein is highly overrated for the most part, because there is a massive marketing demand in whey protein. The harder you make protein seem, or the more you make protein seem like this fucking super important thing that you need an abundance of, the more people are willing to buy whey protein. But ultimately, 1 gram per pound of body weight, it's a cop-out answer, but it's true. That's demonstrably the way to go about it. It's very easy to get that. So if you're cutting weight, get that 1 gram of protein per body weight, per pound of body weight. And if you're bulking, same thing, doesn't change. And that's the main thing. If you're cutting, you have to sacrifice some carbohydrates and fats in order to maintain that gram per pound of body weight. which will then sacrifice some of your sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Like you get a flatter effect. You won't hold as much glycogen in your muscles and fat storage, and thus you will look a little bit thinner and a little bit flatter. But you won't be really losing any muscle tissue if you cut correctly, especially if you have enough protein on board. So temporarily you'll be weaker, your blood pressure will be lower, and all these different things, and thus you'll be weaker and look smaller. But ultimately, as soon as you start bulking again, you get the carbohydrates back in your system, you'll be all good. So really, the way I look at it is 1 gram per pound of body weight when cutting. When cutting the fat, then next, the most important thing is fat, because carbs you don't actually need. They help, but you don't absolutely need them. You need protein and fats to optimize. So if you're cutting weight, 0.25 grams of fats per pound of body weight is the way to go to get optimal hormones and skin and brain function and joint function, etc. So make sure then your fat is around about that area. Not too much, not too little. And then the rest is just carbs. The rest within your calorie range will just then be carbohydrates. So if you're eating 2,000 calories, I mean, it would be very difficult to get many carbohydrates in it at all. So I much prefer to sacrifice carbohydrates for the sake of having optimal fats and proteins, which are numero uno. And then when you're bulking, the exact same thing. The 1 gram per pound of body weight, maybe even higher fats, because now you're bulking, you can get away with it. Maybe say 0.4, 0.5 grams of fats per pound of body weight. And then the rest of your carbohydrates or the rest of your calories can be, or macros, or both in this sense, because essentially that's what it is, can be filled in with carbohydrates. And then if you have plenty of abundance of calories to go with that, like let's say you're doing a 6,000 calorie surplus, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, so long as you're just eating a well-balanced diet, when you're bulking, it's very hard not to get optimal protein, carbohydrates, and fats. It's more about when you're cutting. But when you're cutting, it's just, maintain the same amount of protein as you do when you bulk. If not, maybe a little bit less, because you might go over a gram of protein per pound of body weight in a bulk, just because you can have so many calories. But make that at the very least you get that 1 gram on the cut, and then get the fat second, and then the carbohydrates last. And the way that you get around the fact that you're not consuming many carbohydrates when you're cutting, to make the most of the carbs that you do have them around workout. So in the morning, have a little bit of carbohydrates just to wake up and sustain energy throughout the day if you're at your job, etc. Then if you work out at lunchtime or dinner or whatever it is that you are working out, the meal before you work out is when you have carbohydrates, because the rest of the day you don't really need them. I mean, you might look a bit flatter, you won't be as strong in the gym, but ultimately you only really need carbohydrates for the gym. When you're going to bed, like if you're going to sleep, you don't really need carbohydrates at all. So if you're cutting, just have straight protein meals for dinner. Have a bit of carbohydrates for breakfast, or if breakfast is the meal that you have before working out, then have heaps of carbohydrates there. But before going to bed, unless you're going to work out before bed, you don't really need any carbohydrates at all. So that's how I look at macros, is essentially get your protein, get enough fats to keep your hormone, your brain, and your joints functioning, and then whatever room left you have calorie-wise, that can be carbohydrates. And if you're cutting, those carbohydrates need to be in specific times of the day. If you're doing an off day, you might not need as much protein, so thus then you can maybe carb load. So let's say you do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, like I have. Yesterday I had a huge carb day because I was not training that day. So my protein synthesis wasn't as high. So rather than having, say, a gram per pound of body weight, I had maybe 0.25 grams per pound of body weight. And I then overcompensated with carbohydrates because I knew today was a leg day. So if you want to get really serious about it and very scientific and very specific, you can kind of carb load and sacrifice protein here and there for the carbs. But ultimately, protein numero uno, fat second, carbs last. And if you're bulking, you have plenty of room to get those carbs in after the fact. So hopefully that makes sense. And this applies whether you're doing high intensity training or volume. I mean, I would argue actually, just a straight caveat, if you're doing volume, that you probably need more carbohydrates because you only have so much glycogen storage in a muscle, especially when you're protein deficient or carb deficient rather when you're cutting. So if you're doing volume, you might actually be better off going higher in carbs because you're just using up all this fucking glycogen. Hence why high intensity training is so good when you're cutting, because you'll have, if you are depleted in carbs, high intensity sessions only last like 15, 20 minutes anyway. So you'll have plenty enough glycogen in order to get through that workout. So that's another benefit of high intensity training when you're cutting weight. Anyway, see you guys tomorrow for more Piss and Vinegar. Bye-bye.